Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. I'm so excited for this next guest. Last year, he released his book titled How to Save the West, Ancient Wisdom for 5 Modern Crises, which we spoke with him about on this very show. I remember laying on the couch and devouring every word of this book once it arrived at my doorstep, learning so much along the way. So imagine my happy surprise to learn that the same author has a new book coming out this year, blending philosophy and theology with one of my favorite hobby horses to read about, science. For those of you who may remember, even though I didn't go to university or anything like that for a bachelor's degree, I did though obtain 2 associate's degrees in math and science. So I absolutely love this stuff, and I hope you all will too. So without further ado, joining us now to discuss is Spencer Klavan, an associate editor at the Claremont Institute and the host of the Young Heretics with Spencer Klavan podcast. His latest book is titled Light of the Mind, Light of the World, How New Science is Illuminating Ancient Truths About God, which is due to be released on August 13th. So pre-order your copy now. Spencer, congrats on the book, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Kara. It's such a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate it.
So first, I got to hit you with this question. I'm sure you get it a lot, but what inspired you to write this book?
Right. It's a good question because unlike you, I don't have an original background in science. This wasn't my main area of focus in school or anything. In fact, I went to grad school for ancient literature. And so in the modern day, you might easily ask, well, what does a scholar of ancient texts have to say about science? But that would not have been the most obvious question even a couple hundred years ago. One of the things that I think we've got to recover, and one reason why I wrote this book, is this sense that the truths we discover by studying the natural world actually point us to deeper truths beyond themselves. And it's my opinion that one of the deepest problems afflicting us right now is the inability to see beyond the surface of science to the underlying theological logic behind it. That's why I wrote the book.
You know, it's so true. Sometimes science is just so sterile, right? That they keep it in this tiny little box and that it can't be mixed with anything else, or else somehow it's not science anymore. And yet, of course, the COVID years with all the pseudoscience we saw during that makes you think, wait a second, they aren't really trying to keep things pure, as they would try and say. So you know, lots of lines got crossed there. But, you know, as you talk about in the title of the book, at least, you know, these new developments in science are really starting to put a focus back on God, which might strike many viewers as a surprise. You know, 20 plus years ago, what was it? The 4 horsemen of the atheist apocalypse, right? It was the Dawkins and Dennett and all those guys that they said science is what would undo Christianity. And they use that to unseat, you know, Christianity in the popular culture. And yet now, as you're saying, science is bringing back God into vogue, I guess. So obviously we don't want to spoil your book, but could you give perhaps the audience a little nugget, a little, you know, point, a little fact of science to perhaps whet their appetite for the rest of the book?
Yeah, it's so remarkable how quickly the new atheism, as it was then called, went out of fashion. Those guys like Dawkins have completely lost control of the narrative. And what they've seen, what we've seen, is this materialist philosophy quickly morphing into its own kind of new religion. I think that's what we saw during COVID, as you indicated, that the science became in itself a kind of incantation or an invocation of a deity. And this is because material explanations actually aren't enough to give a full account of the human experience. We all know this intuitively, we feel it instinctively, and the greatest architects of the scientific revolution also said it outright. Isaac Newton was quite forthright about the necessity of referring to ultimate questions by using theology and not material observation. It's impossible to get around this. And one of the things that's been most exciting to me in reading about this subject and writing this book is discovering things like the quantum singularity at the beginning of the universe. We all know about the Big Bang, but we rarely focus on the fact that for an object as small as the Big Bang began with to do anything, it has to be observed by something outside the system. These sorts of things, which are pointing us toward these ancient truths that God saw the world and called it good, are some of the most exciting things going on in natural theology right now.